Hola, amigurinos. My name is Jose Eric. I'm the host of Talking with Famous People. And if you're familiar with the channel, my ways, etc., perhaps you've noted that I appear to be driving a different vehicle today. Your observation is correct. I am driving currently a U-Haul in order to take a bunch of furniture that the realtor doesn't think is going to help with the sale to the dump from the rental. Just be a little bit taller. Okay, so what's this video about? Well, it's about heuristics versus determination metrics. So for all of us, we prefer to defer to heuristics rather than using our own powers for some kinds of attention, and not for others. So, for example, before we got this U-Haul, I called the realtor and asked her to tell me what to do with the couch. She said dump. This problem in the kitchen with the fact that the washing machine doesn't reach its 220 plug. She said tuck the plug behind the washing machine. I just kind of figured that the people aren't gonna try it out, I guess. I mean, it works fine. It's just you have to get rid of where I put the shelves to have it plug in. So I have no problem referring to her on that. Now that's an FE&I kind of problem, not a TI kind of problem. But it's nevertheless the case that if I felt like I was particularly correct about FE&I things about real estate and what people like and stuff, it's somewhat FESI, because presumably the realtor has experience with how people respond to certain kinds of things and can use that experience to be more correctly informative about this current situation. I think our realtor is probably an ENFJ, maybe an INFJ. Our new realtor. So, anyhow, on the other hand, for explanations of an understanding promoting nature, such as why do we have the seasons? Well, it's because the sun rolls around. I mean, the Earth revolves around the sun at a tilt, not directly square to it. So, depending on where it is in its rotation around the sun, you'll get longer days or shorter days during certain parts of the year. The reason I'm doing all of this is because yesterday somebody came in, and this is not uncommon, but it's a little bit less common than it used to be, maybe. Couldn't believe that I was explaining how evolution is not an answer to what causes speciation. We don't even know if speciation occurs. The word speciation is of and from evolution and presumes that indeed one species diverges into two or something. But the point I'm trying to make here is not my normal kind of point, which is, oh my God, evolution is such bullshit, why doesn't everybody listen to me? The point I'm making today is I totally understand why people don't listen to me or think what I'm saying matters, because for anybody who doesn't have TI as one of the things that they don't defer to other people's expertise on, for those who do defer to other people's expertise on TI stuff, they're not going to try to figure out the TI legitimacy of something on their own. They're going to say, that's the sort of thing that I'm going to defer to the experts on. Just like Eric, you defer to the realtor on what you should do with this crap in the back of this truck. So too, well, I defer to the evolutionary scientists. There's broad consensus among the scientific community that evolution is the science explanation for where species come from. And well, every once in a while, it is the case that a divergent thinker comes in and upends the status quo with the truth, and in opposition to many different voices. It does happen sometimes, but not very often. So the person who came in last night, who was just like, oh, come on, so you're right and all these scientists are wrong, etc. You know, I said to him, it just kind of struck me last night, not something I've really said before. Well, you're totally making the right decision here. Like, life's like poker. You can only make a determination. You can only make the best determination given the data you have, situation, etc. It may or may not work out the way you want it to. The same thing is true with this. He's making the right decision. It's just the outcome for him is wrongness, but he's still making the right decision. Because even if he has the capacity, maybe he's TI Tool, TI Dom or something, even if he has the capacity to parse it himself, it's a perfectly reasonable position to say, well, I don't have the inclination, I don't have the time, I don't want to bother doing this work to defend something that many experts in the field have already presumably defended in scholarly journals and such. They would do a better job of it than I ever will. And so I don't need to defeat you, Eric, on point here about evolution. I don't need to respond to your points at all, really. I just need to say, I'm not an expert on evolution. And you sound like you're pretty knowledgeable, but you're disagreeing with every other expert in the field, every other science-minded expert in the field, and the only people who agree with you are creationists. So, accordingly, my best decision is to maintain the position that evolution explains where species come from. Now, one might point out correctly that the person who's saying, I'm going to defer to the scientists, in reality, when he says, I defer to scientists that evolution is correct, the person who's deferring to him doesn't even know what he means when he says evolution. But that doesn't matter, right? Because it's, if they're operating either using heuristics on that kind of attention, or if they're just not inclined to apply themselves in this instance, perhaps they're perfectly capable of the parsing, but just don't want to do the work because why bother? In either instance, he's making the best choice on multiple levels, making the most efficient choice. He's making a very reliable choice in most instances. And it's also, maybe most importantly, a choice that doesn't matter. And this is the second part of this video, is the reason everybody can't, there's two big reasons why everybody, all these scientists and everybody else, maintains that evolution explains things, even though it doesn't. And one of them, I've talked about plenty of times before, is that it's been positioned ever since Darwin came up with it as the alternative to creationism, and that those are the only two choices. That somehow, with species, we have a two-party system. So that's what I've talked about before. But the second reason that I guess had insight about last night's stream is the fact that a big reason why evolution can persist even though it doesn't do its job, is because nothing is predicated on it. So if I were to tell you the earth is flat, now we have all of these explanations for things like the seasons that require us to understand orbits as we do rather than in some other way. Or a better way to put it is, if we do understand orbits as we do rather than some other way, all these other questions have simple, straightforward enough answers that both intuitively make sense and validate when they make predictions and you test those predictions. So evolution, the reason it's able to persist is because it's not making any predictions. Nobody's predicating any other explanations upon evolution, except insofar as those evolutions that are predicated, those arguments that are predicated on evolution are just garbage. Like Jordan Peterson is an evolutionary psychologist trying to claim that he understands why humans are meow way or meow way because he can speculate about possible evolutionary advantages of being that way. Regardless, the important thing to note here is because evolutionary scientists have not established what the mechanism is to evolution, they can't make predictions with it, right? If in fact the original Darwinian theory of evolution were correct, then we would have then we'd be able to see positive mutations and advantages in offspring that are neither their parent species nor a new species yet, but have a different genomic signature in some subtle way that's kind of a middle ground, right? We never see that at all. If Darwinian evolution notions were correct, then for every species with a larger population would evolve more quickly because they'd have more opportunity for positive mutations to be selected in favor of, and they could successfully impact the genome of their local population. So in other words, the large numbers of the population wouldn't negatively impact, but this, because they could still, isolated pockets could still have the same kind of founder's effect role that is presumed by gradualism. Regardless, that's why evolution has no clear established mechanism or any really clear established elements to it, because to the extent that it would clearly establish such, that would imply predictions that we could test and they wouldn't validate, because after all, in the original understanding, gradualism was required billions of years to evolve from one species to another, and that's why we couldn't see it. That the fossil record falsified that with the Cambrian explosion, so up came punctuated equilibrium, which says that evolution races fast for some stretch of time and then shuts off and enters the stasis period for a long period of time. But there's no explanation as to what causes the rapid evolutionary burst and what causes the stasis period at all. There's sort of vagaries about, well, as the species needs to evolve, it evolves, but when it no longer needs to, then it stops evolving. But that doesn't make any sense, because, of course, species don't need to evolve. Individuals are either fit or unfit to survive. Pause. So I'm going to conclude this here with the final thoughts and takeaways are that number one, if you're not a deliberative TI type, either TI1, TI2, or potentially TI3, TI3 can be good at receptive TI, like treating TI matters like a receiver does rather than like either a deliberator or an action type does. So instead of parsing it themselves, TI third might listen to me and understand better than, say, TI 7. Anyway, if you're not TI attention active adequately to tackle the question of evolution yourself, to look into it and try and see if you can figure out what it purports to explain, because I sure as hell can. But if you're not TI 1 or 2, or even if you are but you don't feel an inclination to do the work yourself, then the correct position is Eric must obviously be wrong. Because how could that one dude who's not even a scientist be right about evolution, where all of these evolutionary scientists are in agreement that evolution explains where species come from? So I guess the point is, you're correct to sustain your belief in evolution despite the fact that it's totally wrong. Because if you're using a heuristic, you're correct to defer to people who have expertise in that area instead of trying to do it yourself. And sometimes, even when you make the right decision, turns out your opponent does have the straight flush, and you're wrong, but you don't regret the decision because you know that it was the best decision you could make at the time. So for those of you who want to cling to evolution, go for it. You are correct to do so, but evolution is wrong.